Hi, Math 8 students. Today we're looking at multiplying and dividing numbers in scientific notation. Sometimes when multiplying and dividing, a number will not be written correctly in scientific notation. Be sure to rewrite it so it does. Let's do the odds together. So my trick here is when the decimal number has to be smaller, then the exponent gets bigger. So decimal gets smaller, exponent gets bigger. So let's see what happens when we have that scenario. So for example, this 24.8 is too big. We remember that when something is written in scientific notation, there's only allowed to have one digit in front of the decimal. So we have to change it to 2.48. So that means we decreased the place value by 1. Since we're decreasing the place value by 1, the exponent has to increase by 1. So we're going to change it to 10 to the 9th. In number 3, same thing. This is way too big. So we have to change it to 9.1783. So that means we're decreasing the place value by 2. And since we're decreasing the place value by 2, the exponent has to increase by 2. So that's going to become 10 to the 14th. In number 5, the opposite happens. So here, the decimal has to get bigger. So the exponent gets smaller. So again, we need a digit before the decimal that's not a 0. So I have to increase the place value by 1. Since I'm increasing the place value by 1, the exponent decreases by 1. And then for number 7, this is too small. I need a digit in the ones place. So I need to change it to 3.629, which is increasing the place value by 2. So I'm going to decrease my exponent by 2, making it 10 to the 3rd. So hopefully that makes sense to you. You're going to go ahead and try the evens on your own. So now we have multiplying numbers in scientific notation. A shooting star travels at a rate of 300,000 miles per hour for 200 hours. How many miles did it travel? Remember, distance equals rate times time. So to find the distance, I would have to do the rate, which is 300,000, times the time, which is 200 hours. And if I use my calculator to do that, 300,000 times 200 is 60 million. So we know that's the answer, but let's rewrite it in scientific notation and see what happens. So 300,000 is 3 times 10 to the 5th power. 200 is 2 times 10 to the 2nd power. And 60 million is 6 times 10 to the 7th power. So hopefully you're seeing something that makes this easier to do if we were to have them all written in scientific notation to begin with. 3 times 2 is 6. And 5 plus 2 is 7. So if you remember back to our multiplication of like bases rule, if you are multiplying like bases, you can add the exponents. So instead of doing 10 to the 5th times 10 to the 2nd, I can just add the exponents to get 10 to the 7th. So that is our shortcut when we're multiplying things with like bases or when we're multiplying things with scientific notation. All right, so let's take a look at some examples. Number 1, 1.5 times 10 to the 6th times 6 times 10 to the 3rd. Well, 1.5 times 6 is 9. And 10 to the 6th and 10 to the 3rd would be 10 to the 9th. Okay, so I multiplied 1.5 times 6, and I added my 6 and 3. And we're going to do a lot of this without a calculator today because when it comes time for a state test, typically you're not allowed to use a calculator for this type of multiplication. So now we have 3.2 and 2.8. So we recall our multiplication rules. 8 times 2 is 16. 3 times 8 is 24 plus 1 more is 25. Then we bring down our 0. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 3 is 6. Add those up. We get 896, but since we have two numbers behind decimals, it's 8.96. So we have 8.96 times 10 to some power. Adding my exponents, we get negative 8. All right, let's try another one. Number 5, 6.8 times 10 to the negative 8 and 1.12 times 10 to the second. So again, we're going to multiply 1 and 12 hundredths times 6 and 8 tenths. 8 times 2 is 16, carry the 1. 8 times 1 plus 1 is 9. 8 times 1 is 8, bring down a 0. 6 times 2 is 12, carry the 1. 6 times 1 plus 1 is 7, and 6 times 1 again is 6. Add them up. 6 and 9 and 2 is 11. 8, 9, and 7 make 16, and 6 and 1 is 7. So now we have 3 digits behind the decimal, so it's 7.616. And adding the exponents, since this is a multiplication problem, we have negative 8 plus 2 is negative 6. Okay, so now we're on to some division, dividing numbers in scientific notation. A rocket travels 7,200,000 miles in 4,000 hours. How many or how fast does the rocket travel? So now our rate is equal to distance divided by time. So we want to do the distance, which is this here, 7,200,000, and divided by the time, which is 4,000 hours, to get our rate. And I'm going to cheat and use my calculator here because of these very large digits. So we have 7,200,000 divided by 4,000, and that gives us 1,800. So now let's see if we can find a shortcut with using scientific notation. So 7,200,000 is 7.2 times 10 to the 6th, and 4,000 is 4 times 10 to the 3rd, and 1,800 is 1.8 times 10 to the 3rd. So we see with the exponents that 6 minus 3 is 3. So my bet is that 7.2 divided by 4 is 1.8. And we see that here. If 7,200,000 divided by 4,000 is 1,800, then 7.2 divided by 4 would be 1.8. So the trick here, again, like our exponent rule, is that when we're dividing, we subtract the exponents. So let's try some. So in number 7, we have 8.4 times 10 to the 12th divided by 3 times 10 to the 5th. So we're going to start with dividing. 3 into 8.4. 3 goes into 8 twice, which gives me 6. I have 2 left over. Bring down the 4. 3 goes into 24 8 times. So we get 2.8 times 10, and then 12 minus 5 is 7. So our final answer is 2.8 times 10 to the 7th. Number 9. Same thing here. We start with dividing 9.6 by 8. 8 goes into 9 once with 1 left over, and 8 goes into 16 twice. So that's 1.2 times 10 to the, 12 minus 5 is, again, 7. So 1.2 times 10 to the 7th. Number 11, 6.48 times 10 to the 11th divided by 4 times 10 to the negative 5th. We do 6.48 divided by 4, and 4 goes into 6 once with 2 left over. Bring down the 4. 4 goes into 24 6 times. Bring down the 8, and 4 goes into 8 twice. So we have 1.62 times 10, and then 11 minus negative 5. Remember, when we have a negative and we're subtracting, it becomes a positive. So it's 11 plus 5, so it's 10 to the 16th power. So now you're going to go back and do all the evens on your own. This is pretty simple. Try your best to do it without a calculator. Challenge yourself. Make sure you check in with me before you move on to tonight's homework.